On behalf of the Whitby Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to welcome you to the 2018 provincial election forum for candidates in the Whitby Riding. I'd also like to thank Advocates for its sponsorship, which makes it possible for this event to be delivered to a broader audience live via CKDO. And I'd also like to welcome our other media partner, Rogers. As I mentioned, my name is Kevin Baker, and I will be your moderator this evening. Tonight's event will be a question and answer session versus a traditional versus a traditional or more formal debate that you may have seen on TV before. We do have a few requirements for this evening. An initial list of questions has been prepared through submissions from the business community in a number of ways, including a recent membership survey. Each question will be directed to one candidate, and it will rotate throughout the evening, after which the other candidates will be given the opportunity to respond in alphabetical order. Questions can also be submitted here tonight via paper, and we provided everyone this opportunity to do so prior to the start of the evening. If you have a question and you haven't submitted it, please write it down and provide it to Tony Doyle. Tony, can you let everyone know who you are? He'll review the question in the context of the other questions we already planned to ask this evening, as we don't want duplication. You may address your question to a specific candidate. However, each candidate will be allowed time to respond. Please keep in mind that we will definitely not have time to get to all questions received in advance or submitted this evening. To keep us on track, candidates have 1 minute to respond to each question, and we have a timekeeper identified, Mr. McKenzie. Also, each candidate will be given 2 minutes for opening and closing remarks. Thank you for attending. We're thrilled to have such an engaged community, and we hope this event will be informative for you. At this point, I'm pleased to introduce our candidates, who will provide a 2-minute introduction of themselves. The order they are speaking in was previously determined by random draw. And that order is, to my immediate right, Lauren Coe, Progressive Conservative Party. Lisa Washington from the Liberal Party. Stacey Ledbetter for the Green Party. And Nikki Lundquist for the New Democratic Party. I now invite the candidates to present their 2-minute opening remarks, and we'll start with Mr. Coe.
Thank you, Kevin, for your introduction, and to the Chamber, of which I was a board member, for organizing tonight's meeting. Today, our province is a shell of what it once was. Soaring and out-of-control debt has caused our credit rating to be downgraded 3 times. Ontario is now a have-not province that receives equalization payments. Taxpayers in other provinces are now helping to foot the bill for the Ontario Liberal government's waste and mismanagement. Ontario is the most indebted province or state in the entire world. We pay over $1 billion every month on interest payments alone. Money that should be going towards our classrooms and hospitals. Ontario once used tax dollars to build incredible legacies, progressive conservative legacies like the Ontario Community College System, Sick Kids Hospital, and the first Ministry of the Environment. Now our money is squandered. During the life of the Liberal government, our province has lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs, and that's over 50 jobs per day, every day, for 15 years. Businesses, including the small and medium-sized businesses that are part of the backbone of this community, are overburdened with regulations. We need to create conditions for Whitby businesses to succeed. And this requires a master transportation infrastructure plan and a renewed focus on the cost of doing business. An Ontario PC government would repeal the carbon tax and provincial income taxes for minimum wage earners, cut red tape, and lower the corporate income tax rate from 11.5 to 10.5%. I will continue to work closely with the Chamber staff and Board of Directors to remove uncompetitive policies with a view to protecting existing businesses and increasing investor confidence in Whitby. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Washington. I'm the Ontario Liberal MPP candidate for Whitby. Thank you to the Whitby Chamber of Commerce and Natalie and her team, as well as to the constituents here in the audience. I'm running to be an effective voice here in Whitby. I would like Whitby to be the beneficiary of all the things that I've learned throughout my career. Being an NBA and WNBA sports agent has allowed me to negotiate million-dollar deals. I'm also the founder and CEO of Camden Sports Foundation Canada, where I fund at-risk youth in the vulnerable sector. I was also influential in moving Ontario Basketball Association to Ability Centre. I also received the Woman of the Year in 2016 from the Whitby Chambers of Commerce. I would like to use my effective voice to ensure that we will continue to provide healthcare, childcare, and support for seniors, housing, and more, especially transit. I would like to continue to be a forward thinker here in Whitby, and I will not do it alone. The constituents of Whitby will use their voice to help me be the best MPP if elected. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you to the Chamber for inviting us all here tonight. My name is Stacey Ledbetter, and I'm the Green Party candidate for Whitby. I've lived in Whitby for almost 29 years, be 29 years in July. I raised my children here. They went off to school and came back to live here because they know what a good community this is. We are at a crossroads in Ontario. We cannot sustain things the way they're going. The Green Party has a vision to take Whitby and Ontario forward. The Green Party understands that you need a balance. You need to have sustainability in your industry, in your housing, in your food production, in your healthcare, in your schooling, and that it's all interconnected. And if anything's out of balance, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Our food and water are not secure. The pressure on Lake Ontario, from which all of Durham gets its water, including Whitby, is astronomical. The Great Lakes are all stressed. Our food, the Green Belt, which produces about 50% of the food that we have in Ontario, is under stress as well. These are all things that we have to make sure we take care of, not add to the pressures on. Green Party is a fiscally conservative, socially progressive, and environmentally attuned party. We want to make it all whole, not just parts of it. We don't want to make this group happy and this group unhappy. We don't want it for the haves and for the have-nots. We want to close that gap. We need to work together. And that's one thing that's been lacking in Ontario for a long time, is government working together. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Nikki Lundquist. Thank you for having us here this evening to talk about issues in our community. So my path to this spot is a little bit different from many. I have been a teen mom who was living in poverty. I have been a student who has lived in poverty, a graduate who had crushing debt and lived in poverty, and I have moved into a place in my life where I don't live in poverty, but I have learned very many things along that path. And what I have learned is that long-term decision making makes sense and it pays off. That when you invest in people, it's worth the money. That if we accept that nothing changes, that nothing can change, then it never does. So I have put my name forward and I've decided to run in this election because I am tired of being frustrated by politicians who promise us everything at election time and ignore us the rest of the time, or worse than that, those who actually try to convince us that they're on our side while they offer giant corporate tax breaks and widen gaps between the wealthy and the poor. So I'm saying these things to you because it matters that we invest in us. It matters that we invest in long-term care and healthcare and education, that we invest in people. The NDP has a plan, and it's the only party with a plan to do exactly that, to invest in long-term care and education, healthcare, the things that actually make healthy people, healthy communities. That's good for business, it's good for everybody. it is increasingly clear that this election is about change, and it's going to be about the kind of change you decide you want. And to me, we have a vision with the NDP. Andrea Horvath is a strong leader with integrity, and we are being upfront and transparent, and our platform is online, fully costed, and it's something worth supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
As stated earlier, each question will be directed to one candidate, after which the other candidates will be given the opportunity to respond in alphabetical, and I was advised earlier, ballot order, following the initial responder. Answers are limited to 60 seconds. A yellow card will be displayed to indicate 10 seconds remaining, and a red card indicates time up, at which point the microphone will be silenced. Each of the candidates has 2 opportunities throughout the evening to provide a 30-second rebuttal to an answer. This is entirely at their discretion. However, once they have used both rebuttals, they will not have another opportunity later in the debate. So we'll begin with the first question, and the first question will be going to Mr. Coe. So, Mr. Coe?
Thank you.
The region of Durham and its 8 municipalities have been identified by some politicians and provincial staff as not always being aligned on key issues and priorities for advancing Durham's needs. What would you do as the member for Whitby to bring together all the region's communities to advance a strong and clear voice at Queen's Park for Durham region priorities?
Well, to begin, this relates to infrastructure. I would ensure that they would be working together to create a master intermodal transportation infrastructure plan, which includes short-term and long-term goals and reflects the individual municipal plans in the simultaneous build-out of residential and commercial developments going forward, and also ensure that the transportation planning is coordinated with significant growth plans, the places to grow, the conservation authorities plans, and the provincial planning pieces over and above those that I've already cited.
Personally, I've always felt that Whitby needs a stronger voice at council at Durham Region. And I know that Durham Region has been ignored by the province, especially when it comes to the nuclear power plants and the arrangements focusing on those. Durham Region, I've always felt, is sort of like Ontario's dumping ground. Doesn't get respect at Queen's Park, doesn't get funding. And I would make sure that the province pays attention to Whitby and to Durham. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's clear to both residents and businesses that operate and live in the Durham region that what we need is a partnership between the various municipalities, the region, and the province, and we haven't had that for some time. So if we are going to actually attract strategic investment, if we are going to encourage investment in our communities and create livable towns and cities, we need housing and transit, childcare, healthcare, the things that will make investors want to invest in this community. And we can do that if we can get everybody on the same page. And I recognize it's a challenge, but if we don't do it, we will never be the region that we can be and that we should be. Thank you.
I agree with Nikki. I truly believe in bringing investors into the region to recognize that Durham region is a thriving community, it is a thriving city. And so when we look at Vaughan, City of Richmond Hill, Mississauga, and Markham, we are definitely behind economically. And so to bring investors to be attracted to our region, we have to work together with the municipality, with the constituents, listen to the constituents' voice, and take it back to Queen's Park with an effective voice, and come together and build something great for the Durham region, for the region of Durham.
Thank you. The second question will go to Ms. Ledbetter. Looking ahead to the next 4 years, what 3 specific Whitby projects or priorities have you identified for championing with your party, and how will you ensure their success? whether you are in government or opposition?
For me, and I know for a great many others, including our mayor, that housing and transit are two of the top priorities. The third for me is food and water security. Housing, there's been no major investment in affordable housing in Whitby or in Durham for over a decade. Transit in town, if you're not trying to get somewhere during rush hour, it's going to take you over an hour at any other time of the day. And that puts a great burden and takes a lot of time out of people's days. As I've said, I've already spoken about how we need to make sure that Lake Ontario is clean and viable for our water supply, and we must maintain the greenbelt to make sure our food is secure. We need to work with the province and the rest of Durham region and create a housing strategy. There are over 7,000 people on the waiting list for housing in Durham, and there's only 4,500 spots. That's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will agree that affordable housing is a prominent issue in the region, and it's something that needs to be addressed. The NDP has committed to building 65,000 affordable units across the province over the next decade. We have also indicated that we would fund $180 billion worth of infrastructure investment. So certainly the kinds of projects that are important to the town, like the Innovation Hub in downtown Whitby. I would say that my personal project is the 412 and getting the tolls off of the road, because we are being unfairly taxed on that. And I know it's only 3, but we actually have to invest in long-term care too, because our seniors are in crisis, and it's shameful that we have left them this way for this long.
I would have to agree with Nikki. Housing is definitely top priority, rent control as well, and bringing investors into the region and building more towers and less homes so that we can bring in headquarters and businesses beside these towers so that we can continue to see the economy grow. I would definitely look at transit to ensure that some areas have efficient transit to get our constituents around in the riding. And as well, the 412 infrastructure, the revenue from the 412 goes back into housing, roads, and new highways, and the widening of the 401.
Mr. Coe.
Yes, thank you. My priorities would continue to be, as it was as the regional councillor for this area for 13 years, and more recently as the MPP, economic growth. And that ties and aligns with the Innovation Hub and local economic development here in downtown Whitby, and putting in place the conditions for local businesses to see, but also to support the initiative involving 360 Insights and the other local businesses that are working towards the Innovation Hub. The other priority would be the Baldwin Street in Brooklyn. And I'm proud of being an advocate on this issue for several years. The goal must be to better serve the local needs and desires of the municipality, as well as to achieve a safe, livable, and functional downtown in Brooklyn. And also, in addition, healthcare, affordable healthcare, and long-term care going forward. Thank you.
Okay, question 3 will begin with you, Ms. Lundquist. Stats Canada has reported that there are over 416,800 small businesses in Ontario, employing over 4.5 million people in our beautiful province. What are your plans to help support small mom-and-pop shop businesses?
Thank you. So we understand that micro and small business is actually a big part of the economic engine of Ontario, that they are the job creators in this province. So the NDP has come up with a comprehensive plan that includes getting hydro rates under control by reducing them by 30% and returning it to public ownership, investing in infrastructure to get people and goods moving, investment in transit for the same reasons. We have indicated we would create 27,000 new internship opportunities. There is a commitment to put 33% of government expenditures on goods and services into small businesses, so to have small businesses provide those services to an NDP government. And finally, universal pharmacare, medical care, drug coverage, all of that, dental care, it always helps people, and when we help people, we help business.
The Liberal Party understands the necessities of small businesses and mom and pop shops, and we are investing $100 million into the GTHA Regional Fund. It'll invest into small businesses and medium businesses, as well as a 25% reduction on hydro bills.
Mr. Coe?
Thank you. Under the Ontario PC party plan, we'll be cutting red tape and job-killing policies that have held our community, particularly here in Whitby and in Region Durham and all of Ontario, back for too long. At the consultations that I've undertaken both with members of the Ontario Chamber and across the province, they've told me that since the implementation of the 380,000 regulations by the Liberal government over the last 15 years has been a significant impediment for them to accomplish their business goals going forward. And we would work in collaboration with the local chamber and the Ontario Chamber to cut the red tape and put in place a centralized body to affect that.
The Green Party knows that small business runs Ontario and all of Canada. It's ironic, most of the people in the Green Party are small business people. The first thing the Green Party would do is raise the exemption level on the employment health tax from $450,000 to $1 million. This would automatically and immediately benefit small businesses. They wouldn't have to do any paperwork. It would just happen. The current exemption is $450,000 for companies with payrolls under $5 million. This means that a company does not pay an employer health tax on their first $450,000. Small businesses are the leading employers in Ontario, and that's going to keep going. Payroll tax reductions help small businesses immediately by lowering their labor costs, improving their monthly cash flow, and creating incentives to create jobs. Lower labor costs help businesses create more jobs and better paying jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 4 is for you, Ms. Washington.
Yes.
Do you support maintaining current levels of financial support for municipal governments? If not, how would you change them?
I absolutely support financial support for municipal governments. We need to work together to ensure that each city grows and thrives. And as a liberal candidate, if elected, I will be an effective voice at Queen's Park to ensure that I am listening to the constituents here in Whitby to hear their concerns and bring it back to Queen's Park.
Mr. Coe?
Yes, thank you. The regional funds that are already provided to municipalities across the province of Ontario, for example, the Eastern Ontario Fund under a PC government would continue and provide the level of supports that are needed, particularly in our community and other parts of the region of Durham. Thank you.
The Green Party believes that the structure of this funding needs to change. You need to make sure that municipalities that are suffering under the weight of overpopulation or lack of industry or lack of business need more help than municipalities that are doing quite well. So the Green Party wants to take a look at the entire structure and make sure that it is fair and equitable and just across this province. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think it's pretty clear that municipalities have been underfunded for a long time, and we can trace that right back to the downloading of services without money to pay for the things that people in communities need, like affordable housing and transit. So I would say that the commitment from the NDP has been very clear that we will fund those things, and we will make sure that municipalities can provide people in their communities with adequate services to increase the standard of living for people in the community. Thank you.
Ms. Washington?
I answered the question.
Oh, sorry.
She started it.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. I've lost track.
That's all right. I can keep talking if you'd like. I try to keep it very small.
You have to use up a token, though.
Yeah.
Everybody's clutching that.
I'm waiting.
So, sorry, my apologies. Question 5 is for you, Mr. Coe.
Thank you.
When Highway 412 and 418 were introduced, they were not intended as toll routes. Will your party re-examine this issue in government, and what is your position on tolls for an all-new provincial highway expansion in the years ahead?
Thank you for that question. I will advocate for funding a proper balance so that Highway 12 is affordable for families and businesses. I would advocate for a full interchange, including an eastbound ramp from Lake Ridge Road onto Highway 401, and also would advocate to accelerate the widening of Highway 401 and building of more GO stations east of Whitby to ease traffic volumes, particularly across the northern part of the town through downtown Brooklyn. Thank you.
GPO is generally in favor of road tolls, there we go, because they do support infrastructure. However, the 412, when it was free, it was the best thing that happened to the north-south of Whitby that we've ever seen. And I know that the town pleaded with the government to not put a toll on it, and they were ignored. I would remove that toll if Green Party is in government. If we're in opposition, would push so that the money that's generated by that goes to the town of Whitby. Congestion is a serious problem. Everybody's trying to get to and from work. We need that north-south route, and it needs to be free. Thank you.
So I'm actually going to agree that the 412 and the 418 should be free, and it's not because I don't think we need services. I don't think that we put that on the backs of the people in the community in this way, though. So anybody who's driven the 412 when it was free knows that it was a great way to get people moving back and forth and to get people home to their families, and also to get businesses moving their goods and very freely. The difficulty now is that we have what is essentially blood sport on Lake Ridge Road. People passing on the right. We have people flooding the downtown with their cars. It's created a danger. It's environmentally problematic as well. The tolls need to be removed, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They need to go.
Again, I will be an effective voice for the constituents here in Whitby. The 412 fees go back into infrastructure, 20 to 30% lower than the 407. Keep in mind that we do need infrastructure, and that's why long before the 412 came about, constituents knew that there would be a toll charge for the 412, and so we have to remember that the 412 tolls go back into infrastructure and care, healthcare for the communities. Yes, thank you.
Were you wanting to use your rebuttal?
I wasn't trying to throw it. It just happened, but it was more aggressive than I intended, for sure.
That's, I think, appropriate entertainment for us. Just throw them at Matt. That's great. Go ahead, please.
Honestly, not intentional. So I just want to say that I don't want to set up a false narrative about this. Everybody who has been on the 412, and I'm someone who actually uses the 412, knows it's empty.
Yes.
And an empty road doesn't provide any money to anybody. And so it's obvious what needs to be done. And it's time that the advocates, or the people who say they're advocates in this community, stand up for the community and get rid of the tolls on the 412.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go to question 6, and this one will be Ms. Ledbetter. Many Ontario companies are struggling with high energy costs. What will your party do with energy policy to ensure businesses can remain competitive, not only when compared against others in Ontario, but across Canada and into the U.S.?
To start off, the Green Party would cancel the current Liberal policy of hydro fair pay. That's we'll give you a discount now and hit you with a massive increase later. Green Party would balance hydro prices, look into the management of our power. We know that there's still areas that are producing excess power and then it's sold to the states. So if we're overproducing, why are we overcharging? We would also firmly move to decommission both Pickering and Darlington, which are both offline right now and not creating any hydro, so it's not like we need them. That decommissioning would also save the province about $32 million, and we can buy hydro cheaper from Quebec than we can from having the nuclear power plants creating it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, thank you. So the NDP has a comprehensive hydro plan that is online, and our intention is to return it to public ownership, because we know that when we introduce profit motivation into the hydro system, we end up with nothing but larger bills and deeper problems. So I would say the important parts are end of mandatory time usage fees and Stacey's getting aggressive with hers too. A cap on profit at 3% instead of the current 5.5 from the OEB, and we will buy back hydro and secure the benefit of that public asset so we can use that money and invest it in the things that people need.
No, well, after we've gone through, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The Liberal government has created the Fair Hydro Plan and has made energy bills 25% lower on average for families, small businesses, and farms, and low-income families, and those in rural and remote areas are seeing a decrease as high as 40 to 50%. Again, speaking as the first, as the candidate who's not been elected, I will be an effective voice at Queen's Park. Our Liberal government hasn't done everything right, but having an effective voice and an individual that can deliver what the constituents want, I'm the individual.
Mr. Coe?
Thank you. We would place an immediate moratorium on any new energy contracts while walking back and renegotiating the existing contracts. And we would return all Hydro One dividends, saving the average family, for example, of $70 on their hydro bills, and we would stop the practice of bearing the cost of conservation programs on hydro bills and instead move those programs to the tax base overall. And together those three measures would save an average family about $173, and that's another 12% savings on the average family's hydro bill.
Rebuttal, Ms. Ledbetter?
I just want to sort of put out a caution there about the promises to buy back Hydro One. It's a complicated business transaction. There's no guarantee that it'll be for sale or that you can buy it back. The Liberals spent millions trying to get rid of the lease on the 407 and were overruled by 3 levels of courts. So a promise to buy that back or to take it back, it's not going to happen.
And Mr. Coe?
To my colleague from the Liberal candidate.
Yes.
Thank you. The Auditor General has exposed that the Liberals have been hiding billions of dollars of hydro rate related deficits off the government books, and that to pay for these deficits, the Liberal government would have to let electricity rates skyrocket to the highest that they've ever been.
Okay, Ms. Lunk?
Yes, and the deficit is there because we believe in care and not cuts. We believe in the Fair Hydro Plan, and that's why the Liberal government created the 25% lower on average bills, as well as 40 to 50% in the rural areas. Now, I also would like to caution on the buyback of hydro. It's not something that you can just buy back.
Thank you. For this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is something you can just buy back because their stock's freely traded on the market. So you can actually choose to do that if you so choose to do it. And the other thing I would say is we are in a lot of this mess because of the Liberal scandal in terms of the gas plants, but also in terms of bad contracts that have actually made people hate green energy when it's a positive thing for the environment and for production of energy.
Okay. Thank you. So this question will begin with you, Ms. Lundquist.
That a little bit, but
Okay, you'll be the
Okay.
first respondent. Will your party raise or lower taxes, for business, and in which ways?
Okay, so the NDP has been very clear, and again, the platform speaks to it plainly. The NDP will not be raising small business taxes. They will raise large taxes on large corporations by 1% in the first 2 years and by 0.5% in the second 2. We have been very clear about the benefit that large corporations have received in the economy without actually doing what was promised, which is putting the money back into the economy so that it would create jobs. None of that happened, so we're saying it's time to kick back in and make sure that the communities and the people in them have the things that they need.
We're going to stay at 22% and not raise it to 28%. Again, we're putting $100 million into the GTHA Regional Fund to invest into small and medium businesses.
Yes, under the Ontario PC plan, good jobs will be created by lowering taxes, including a job-creating corporate income tax reduction from 11.5 to 10.5%. And will cut the red tape and the job-killing policies that have held our community and all of Ontario back for too long. Thank you.
Ms. Ledbetter?
I've already spoken about the Green Party's health employment tax will be, the level will be increased so that small businesses pay less on that. They will also increase tax incentives for small businesses that offer apprenticeships. And the Green Party will also cut all subsidies to major corporations, specifically oil and gas companies. They get about $18 billion in tax incentives a year. That's a big chunk of money that could be going into the provincial coffers and the federal coffers to help with infrastructure. They would also increase incentives for the creation of green energy, which will also help reduce industry's hydro costs, because that's one of the leading killers of industry right now in Ontario, is the cost of hydro. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe, Mr. Coe, you want to reply?
Yes, to the answer from my colleague from the NDP party. What the NDP platform does call for is increased pressure on job creators. For example, it ends incentives for small business employer health tax exemptions. And the platform increases the corporate tax rate from 11.5% to 13%. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Washington, I'll
Yes.
start with you on this one, and I
Sure.
won't come back to you at the end.
Okay.
Small businesses in Ontario are swamped by paperwork and red tape. What will your party do to alleviate this burden for small businesses?
Again, I'm going to go back to the $100 million into the GTA Regional Fund. Our platform is very clear. The Liberal government has always been clear. Our Premier has always been clear in supporting small businesses and medium businesses. It's very important to have an effective voice as the MPP for Whitby and listening to the constituents day in and day out. Thank you.
Well, we're the party that initiated the Red Tape Commission to begin. And as part of the opportunity we have, if we have the opportunity to form government, we will ensure that there's a central body to work with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and other chambers across the province to undertake an audit of the 380,000 regulations that exist in this province, and listen very carefully to the people on the front line, the local businesses, and listen to their advice in terms of what red tape policies in their estimation need to be cut and how that would be affected over what period of time. Thank you.
The Green Party of Ontario would definitely reduce the red tape and look to streamline reporting and the number of reports that they have to make, and to make their taxes, excuse me, integrate tax collection with their HST, harmonized tax collection as well, so that they're not looking to pay the quarterly but can make it all at the same time, and streamline licensing and other areas so that they don't have to spend a year filling out paperwork before they can open their doors. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think what everybody wants is for small business to be able to function, to be able to comply with the legal obligations that they have. So legal obligations including things like the AODA and employment standards, things that actually are really important in terms of compliance. So to me, I would say that what the NDP would do is commit to making sure that employers have the tools, small businesses have the tools to respond to the needs of meeting those obligations.
Mr. Coe, this will be your question to respond to first, please.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, no, she started.
I
Yep.
started.
No, I made that mistake.
That's okay.
My
Second
bad.
one.
I'm not sure why.
They're very concerned about me.
We're
It's
all trying to
good.
be very inclusive.
That's
It's nice.
right, and integrated.
Mr. Coe, will your party work with the town to develop bypasses for downtown Whitby and Brooklyn, including looking at adding an interchange at Garden and the 401?
Well, in my identification of the three priorities that my party would bring, I already highlighted Baldwin Street in Brooklyn, and I did a lot of work with the local council at the time where I served 13 years, and I indicated that the goal must be to better serve the local needs and desires of the municipality, as well as to achieve a safe, livable, and functioning downtown in Brooklyn. And I've worked long and hard to effect that, and I can see Mayor Mitchell at the back of the room, and he will attest to that as well. Thank you.
Green Party would look into those bypasses. Coming off at Brock Street in Whitby is not good for drivers, not good for downtown Whitby. Having it at Garden would create a better traffic flow. Creating the bypass in Brooklyn, you want to maintain the quaintness that is Brooklyn. And with the 407s, or so close to there, having that bypass would help Brooklyn maintain their heritage. We need better traffic flow in Whitby. Everybody's jammed up trying to get to and from. You've got the north-south going to the 401. You've got the east-west moving between Pickering and Oshawa. And opening these areas up would definitely make things better for everyone concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. So I agree with Stacey that we need better traffic flow and we need more safety. What I don't agree with Mr. Coe about is his identification of priorities, and I only disagree because there's nothing in a Conservative platform anywhere that actually identifies those as priorities that the Conservative government is going to fund, whereas the NDP has actually said we will put $180 billion into infrastructure investment. We've been very clear about what our promises are, and Whitby frankly needs a champion on these kinds of issues, and we need to start picking people who will be that champion.
Again, I agree with the bypass. I too have met with Mayor Don Mitchell and had discussions in regards to Brooklyn, Baldwin, and the traffic flow. And again, we need an effective voice at Queen's Park to ensure that we're listening to the constituents and we're bringing feedback back to Queen's Park to ensure that we do get this bypass.
Ms. Ledbetter, this one's for you. The GTA estimates Pearson Airport, the GTAA estimates Pearson Airport will have reached capacity in the next 10 to 20 years. What is your position on using the lands designated 45 years ago in Pickering for an airport to meet future demands?
Any Landover Landings people here tonight? Good. I'm against it. The lands designated are some of the most prime pieces of farmland in this area, and to pave them over and turn them into runways would be not only bad for Durham Region, but bad for Ontario. Hamilton has already voiced that they would like their airport made bigger. It's just something I cannot support. Thank you.
So I would just like to point out that this is actually a federal issue and the province doesn't have a lot of say in the issue. And the NDP, because of that, doesn't have an official position on it. But I would be remiss if I didn't actually acknowledge that agricultural lands are increasingly important and increasingly disappearing, that green space matters to people in terms of quality of life, that farmland is of value, and that we need to be more conscientious about what we're doing with those natural reserves that we do have.
I agree with Nikki. Our green belt, our agricultural land is very, very important. I would listen to the constituents of Whitby to hear their decision on an airport and whether we need one or not. Again, it is federal. Pardon me. It is federal, and the provincial government really has no say on it.
Mr. Coe?
Thank you. The lands that we're speaking of and the responsibility to move ahead with this airport is a federal responsibility, but I think we need to look at it more broadly. The priority must be given to further expanding and investing in the assets that already exist in the region of Durham, including those lands, including highways 401 and 404, the Oshawa Executive Airport, yes, the Pickering Airport lands, and the Port of Oshawa. We need to take a more global look at it, a wider regional economic look at it going forward. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Washington.
So are you saying that we should build on Greenbelt?
I don't know what to do. I think I'll give you 30 seconds since you were asked a question.
I didn't hear the question.
Are you saying that we should build on Greenbelt land, agricultural land? You're saying that we...
No, I'm not saying that we should build on Greenbelt lands. It's a federal responsibility to make that decision.
Right.
And they will make that decision in collaboration with the municipalities that have jurisdiction in that area, the city of Pickering, going forward.
Are you in support of Greenbelt? Are you in support?
Going forward,
We're not debating, so you've
No,
asked
we're
a
not.
question, and Mr. Coe has given his best response.
Can I take that? No worries.
So the next question will begin with Ms. Lundquist. So what will your party do to encourage job creation in the province?
So we know that the strongest indicator of creating investment and job creation is actually having a place where people want to live and work. So our strategy is to do several things, including create programs that support people. Programs like dental care, health coverage that is more comprehensive than what we currently have. We have a plan to create internships, as I said earlier, of 27,000. We are absolutely going to look at how we create more investment in hubs, including innovation hubs like the one that Whitby is trying to launch. We are well positioned to actually start looking at how do we create advanced manufacturing in the region, particularly in the Oshawa region with GM. So we have a strong plan, and if you would like to see it, it's all online and available to you. Thank you.
I want to be an effective voice and work with the municipality to ensure that we pitch to headquarters like Amazon, Spotify, and ensure that those businesses, corporate companies are interested in coming into our region and they are attracted to our region, as well as investors, to bring their headquarters, corporations, restaurants, and more to our region to build the economy right here to create jobs.
Mr. Coe?
Thank you. Under the Ontario PC party plan, good jobs will be created by lowering taxes, including a job-creating corporate income tax reduction from 11.5% to 10.5%. We'll cut the red tape and job-killing policies that have held our community and across the region and all of Ontario back for too long, unlike the Liberal government and the third party.
Ms. Ledbetter?
Cutting corporate taxes has never created jobs.
Never.
Ever. Creating communities that attract business, creating an environment that attracts business, especially the focus on green energy. And I also want to talk about the Pickering and Darlington. Decommissioning those two plants would create over 16,000 jobs a year over 16 to 18 years. More jobs than are created now in those nuclear reactors, more jobs than mothballing it in 2028. So you want a plan to create jobs? That's a lot of people working and making a safer community. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question, I'll begin with you, Ms. Washington.
Yes.
So, apropos, the next question is, do you support the closure of the Pickering nuclear station in August when its license expires?
Again, I would have to listen to the constituents and go back to caucus if elected and have an effective voice of what the constituents want and need. I will not do this alone. I am not an MPP that will do this alone. It is the voice of Whitby, the constituents here, that will make me a better leader and advocate for them.
Mr. Coe?
Yes, the Ontario PC party will be listening very closely to the professionals in the industry, as we have all along, and going forward to their expert opinion. And on the basis of that information provided, we will analyze it very carefully and then consult widely within the industry before making a decision. It's the prudent thing to do.
No, I don't support keeping Pickering open. I support closing it. The people who live around it know that they are facing a decrease in their property values. They cannot get insurance against a nuclear accident, so if something happens, they've lost everything they own. It is one of the oldest plants in the province. It needs to be decommissioned.
Thank you. So the NDP has been very clear that it supports evidence-based energy policy that is in the public interest. And so we would assess all energy proposals regardless of technology, and we would base it on rigorous peer-reviewed cost-benefit risk analyses, which haven't been done and need to be done.
Thank you. Next question, I'll begin with you, Mr. Coe.
Thank you.
So this one moves a little bit outside of Whitby, but still obviously as an MPP, you have a lot of influence on decisions that affect all of our communities in Ontario. So taking care of everyone's health needs includes members of Ontario's Indigenous communities. Many families are forced to live without adequate housing. They lack clean running water and have few economic opportunities. Indigenous children and youth have the highest suicide rates in the province. How will your party's platform improve the health of Indigenous people and communities in Ontario? And that's
It's really a two-part question, isn't it? Part of it deals with access to health. Can you just read it again, please?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So taking care of everyone's health needs includes members of Ontario's Indigenous communities. Many families are forced to live without adequate housing. They lack clean running water and have few economic opportunities. Indigenous children and youth have the highest suicide rates in our province. How will your party's platform improve the health of Indigenous people and communities in our province?
All right, to the first part of the question that deals with health and access to adequate housing, the funding for public health units here in Ontario for over the past 15 years has been grossly inadequate. I was the president of the Association of Local Public Health Agencies, and they have not been equipped, particularly in Northern Ontario, with the budget funding that they need to affect the type of health care that's required in adequate housing in particular. They're the frontline deliverers. In terms of the mental health, the province has not had a full mental health strategy in place to deal with all sectors across the province, particularly the one that you're referencing in the question. In terms of suicide rates, the mental health strategy that we announced over 2 weeks ago does call for a special suicide prevention group would be situated in Northern Ontario to address those type of challenges that are occurring far too often. Thank you.
Ms. Ledbetter?
It's something that comes up in the Green Party a great deal because we have a lot of members who are Indigenous, and it always comes down to you can't touch it because it's federal. It's a federal issue. However, there are Indigenous people who live in this province and are residents of this province, and the province needs to take care of their water and food security and help with their housing and make sure they have access to proper health care. Creating clinics that have not only modern medicine but Indigenous healers, creating access to these clinics, not just for the communities that are remote and have to do the fly-in, but even ones that have access to the roads. There are no clinics, there are no hospitals, there are nobody close by. We need to invest in these communities as Ontario, with or without the federal government. Thank you.
Thank you. As someone who grew up in Northern Ontario, I have a very clear sense of how dire the situation is on reserve. The government, all governments have failed Indigenous peoples in this country. The state of housing is deplorable. It is worse than third world conditions. The problems that Indigenous people face in terms of healthcare are equally almost insurmountable, but there has to be a commitment to invest, and the NDP has been very clear in its healthcare strategy that it will invest in Indigenous communities and have mobile health clinics and make sure that care goes to the communities where it's most needed. Thank you.
I would agree with Nikki. We have to recognize that the Indigenous community needs us. We need to be an effective voice. And we will continue to invest in mental health. The $2.1 billion is to deliver more accessibility and better integrated care for the Indigenous community and for all.
Thank you. We'll begin the next one with Ms. Ledbetter.
Yes.
Okay. Precarious work is generally defined as employment that is poorly paid, insecure, and unprotected. The Law Commission of Ontario estimates that 22% of jobs in Ontario are of a precarious nature. How does your party plan to create more economic stability for vulnerable workers and at the same time ensure businesses aren't unfairly impacted by any changes?
Well, first off, we have to take a very close look at temp agencies and how temp agencies operate, and how there are companies who the majority of their workforce are temp and having to go to payday loan places to get their pay. Straightening out those regulations and making sure that all workers are protected regardless of what industry they're working in. It's also a matter of making sure that the under-the-table economy, where a lot of these precarious workers are, where they're paid cash every day, it specifically affects a lot of migrants and a lot of women and a lot of immigrants because they don't always know the language. And we need to make sure that they're all protected and put things in place so that companies can't take advantage of these people, not only precarious employment, but they're often in precarious status within the province. Thank you.
Thank you. So the rise of non-standard work by design, I would say, has been a growing problem, and it certainly affects women and racialized communities worse, but it also affects youth far more than anyone else. So what is clear is that we need to have a strategy to address a bunch of things, including wage stagnation, low wages, where I think it's 25 or 28% of people make under $15 an hour in this province. So increase in minimum wages, rising standards in the Employment Standards Act, and truthfully, many of those things can be done with limited red tape, but they can have a profound positive impact on people's lives. We can't keep producing a generation who are stuck with contract work and no hope of a good job to go to, no benefits, no health care, no anything that gives them hope to create a better future.
The Liberal government increased minimum wage for this reason. 52% of women were mostly minimum wage earners. And so we will continue with the increase in 2019, if re-elected, to ensure that we have a better economy and stability in jobs.
Thank you. Many of the employers that I've consulted with on this particular topic, both here in Whitby and across the region of Durham, have some solutions to address what you've described in your question. And those solutions and approaches are approaches that are under consideration now by the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, and we'll continue to consult on those particular approaches because we want to continue to hear directly from businesses how they can address and help what was referenced in the question.
Thank you.
Ms. Ledbetter.
That was like one of the best non-answers I've heard. Having employers try to solve precarious work is not going to help the problem.
Ever.
Having strict laws about how temp workers are done and how migrant workers are dealt with, those are what we needed. Letting employers call the shots is what's been happening now, and it's not working.
That's right. Thank you for that.
We're all out of challenges.
Yep.
Yes, I noticed. So the next one will be Ms. Lundquist.
Okay.
It's a related question, actually. So I think someone actually referenced the stat in their answer. Approximately 49% of all employees in Ontario are women, but women disproportionately represent 57% of minimum wage earners. Women with a university degree who work full-time year-round earn about 30% less than equally educated men.
Yes.
What is your party's position on addressing the wage gap between genders?
Well, I actually appreciate that the question acknowledges that there is a gender wage gap because people often deny that it exists at all. So the party has been very clear about doing several things. So one of the primary things is the introduction of universal childcare, because what we know is when we provide women with choices, they go back into the workforce sooner, they are able to earn wages over the long term. It helps them both at the time where they go back into the workplace, but also at retirement, so that those years aren't excluded from their earnings. It's actually a really important strategy, and perhaps the most important strategy in terms of actually addressing the gender wage gap.
Thank you. Ms. Washington?
Yes, we've created the pay transparency for this reason, And again, we need to recognize that women are at the bottom. And so we need to continue to put forth the pay transparency and not get rid of it, the Pay Transparency Act. And as well, the creating childcare for women is going to help elevate them in the workforce. Free tuition, as well as OHIP plus.
Mr. Coe?
Thank you. Everyone, regardless of gender, deserves equal pay for equal work. And according to the Financial Accountability Officer, under the Liberals' watch, the wage gap has not improved since 2011, and it continues to be pervasive across all industries. It's time for real action to improve gender equity, not additional cynical re-election ploys from a tired government.
Ms. Ledbetter?
Green Party also believes in that childcare needs to be funded. And they also believe that you need to put that childcare where women work, so that there isn't the worry, there isn't the, oh my God, I've got to get to daycare and the GO train is late. That puts a lot of stress on women, more than they don't need more stress. The Green Party also wants to ensure that women returning to the workforce after maternity leave aren't unjustly forced out of their positions. A lot of women face a changing job when they come back, and they often leave within the first 4 to 6 weeks because they didn't come back to the job they left. They come back to a different environment, and they're often judged for having children. We've got to stop punishing women in the workforce for having children.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay. I'll start with
Yes.
you, Ms. Washington. Will your party implement any changes to laws pertaining to the rental leasing of commercial and residential units?
Well, we created the rent control, and so I'm happy to listen to the constituents and business owners for leasing. I have got that question already during my canvasses. What will we do to cap rent on leases? And so I'm happy to listen to the constituents and bring that back if elected.
Mr. Coe?
The Ontario PC Party won't take rent control away from anyone, period.
Ms. Ledbetter?
Problem is that rents are skyrocketing, and rent control needs to be changed to match that skyrocketing. But it also goes back to the investment in affordable housing. I work in social housing. I manage 2 not-for-profit co-ops. And the number of people who are so desperate to find something that's under $1,600 a month to live in is astronomical. We have to do more to make housing affordable. And it's not just rent care. It goes back to making sure that there's jobs, good jobs that people can have so that they can pay the rent. It's looking at guaranteed annual income. At $25,000, that's a decent annual income. If you make more, then you don't need that anymore. But if you're in the $15,000, if you're a full-time on minimum wage, we need to close that gap as well so that housing can be affordable.
Thank you.
Thank you. So whether it's commercial house or housing, what is obvious is that there's a problem with leasing. And there was a story today that was really illustrative of how problematic it is. It is cheaper to rent a house in Forest Hill than it is for people to rent apartments. That makes 0 sense. So it is clear that what we need is actually effective, reasonable, predictable rent control so that everybody can plan and make good decisions long term.
Thank you. This will be the last question, and then we'll be allowed to provide your concluding remarks in a reverse order of the beginning of the evening. I'll help you with that. So I believe I'll start with Mr. Coe.
Yes.
The question is your party willing to bring public sector pensions more in line with the private sector by changing them to defined contribution plans rather than defined benefit plans?
We've received submissions on this topic from advocates and other organizations as well. And those submissions are very detailed and being evaluated as we meet here this evening. And on the basis of those submissions, we will be consulting with the industry again and with the general public going forward to obtain their views. And on the basis of that, their views, we'll be making a decision.
Ms. Ledbetter?
The Green Party really doesn't want to mess with teachers' pensions, doesn't want to mess with auto workers' pensions. We don't mind messing with MPP pensions. Trying to make public sector and private sector pensions suddenly be on the same scale would cause such horror for so many people. If you're going to look at public sector pensions, you have to look at everything and start from another spot. You can't suddenly tell somebody who's, 2 years from retirement, oh, we're changing your pension now, and you're going to get this. That's unjust. Thank you.
Ms. Lundquist?
It's also illegal, so that won't happen and can't happen. So the problem, I think, with the question as it's posed, it assumes that defined benefit pensions are problematic, and they're not. So what we're doing is racing to the bottom, and if everybody has a defined contribution plan, if there's ever a problem with it, then who covers it? The government's going to cover that anyway. There's no question about what has been happening in terms of people's retirement, and we don't have a public system that actually will be able to respond to a change like that if and when something negative happens. So I think that what we really need to be thinking about is how do we plan for a mass retirement of people with adequate pensions to support them as they age? We don't have that now, and we're going to be in a crisis, and that won't help.
Ms. Washington?
To what Nikki said, the same question I've proposed back to our Liberal government. I've said that we need to look into this, and again, being an effective voice and hearing from the constituents, once we come to a resolution, we'll be able to roll it out.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
So we're going to allow you to do your closing remarks again in reverse order. So first will be Ms. Lundquist.
Thank you. So I didn't write closing remarks because I wanted to be able to just speak to you about what happened here tonight. And I've heard some things that I am personally concerned about. So this idea that we're going to give minimum wage earners a tax cut instead of an actual increase in wages, well, that's going to mean they're going to be about $1,100 out of pocket. And I don't know if you've ever been a minimum wage earner, but I have. And that means food for weeks, if not months. So that is not an adequate response to a poverty reduction strategy or a wage stagnation problem. I have heard Mr. Coe say things about a hydro plan, but they don't have a plan. And we do, and it is a solid plan, and it has been reviewed as well. Lowering corporate taxes, as Stacey said, does not create a single job. But what it does is line the pockets of the wealthiest among us. And I think people actually feel that right now. I think people understand that the vast majority of people have not fared well in this economy, that a very few have, and the last thing we need to do is give them more. And finally, I would say that if we want to create jobs and economies and investment, then we can't just say we want them. So yeah, sure, I'd like Spotify to come here, but if we don't create the conditions that make it attractive to come here, they're not coming. So we need to invest in housing, and we need to invest in transit, and we need to invest in people so that we have a livable, workable community that attracts investment, that supports all of us. Thank you.
Ms. Ledbetter.
Thank you. There are a lot of people struggling in this province, and a lot of these people are people who've never had to struggle before, and they're a little surprised. They've been caught off guard by this. And there's a lot of people who are angry. The problem when you're angry is that you don't want to listen to a long-winded solution. You want a quick fix. You want somebody to blame. And it isn't necessarily your government. They'll target somebody else or pick on another community to blame for their situation. We can't do that, and we can't let that happen, and we can't let the province dissolve into ugliness about this person and that person. We have to look at this as that we're all in a boat and we're all in it together, and we need to row together. We need to work together. We need to work together on solutions. We need to help one another. You know, you can't hear a soundbite and get angry and say, yeah, that's right. Sound bites aren't policy. Sound bites don't put food on the table. Sound bites don't reduce your hydro bills. We have to come together as a province, as a people, and make the changes we need to make. We have to close that gap between the haves and the have-nots. We have to make sure that everyone has adequate health care, pharmacare, dental care, that no one is left out in the cold. You know, there was a time when minority governments were the rule here, and the one thing I liked about them is that they forced everyone to work on solutions together. We need more of that. Thank you.
Ms. Washington.
Thank you to the Whitby Chamber of Commerce for having this great debate, and thank you to the candidates as well here to my left. Again, I want the constituents of Whitby to remember that it's an effective voice you're looking for. We need to elevate the economy here in Whitby. We need to bring Spotify here. We need to bring Amazon here, and we need to be competitive. We need to have individuals with an effective voice to work with the municipality as well as the federal government to ensure that we work, grow, and play and stay right here in Whitby. We do not and we will not cut. We care.
Mr. Coe. Mr. Coe, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Like the local businesses that are here tonight, I want to make Whitby a place where businesses choose to locate, invest in our community, and create jobs. We should be focused on making it easier for businesses to thrive, not harder. Between skyrocketing hydro rates and strangling red tape, Ontario is no longer open for business. Now, there's no secret to creating good jobs in Ontario. It starts with lower rates, cutting red tape, and reducing hydro bills for individuals and businesses alike. What we don't need is another 4 years of Liberal mismanagement. What local businesses most certainly don't need is the NDP raising the corporate tax to 13%, ending the small business employer health tax exemptions, or running $18 billion in deficits over the next 5 years. The Ontario PCs will reduce the corporate tax rate from 11.5 to 10.5% and cut red tape. Will unshackle the great potential that has been stifled by the Liberal government that knows how to borrow, how to spend, how to make 11th hour promises in a desperate bid to retain power. On June 7th, Ontarian voters have a clear choice. 4 more years of Liberal waste, another Bob Rae NDP government that tripled Ontario's deficit in 5 years, or a government that brings relief to families, puts more money in your pocket, and makes Ontario a place that is open for business again. Thank you.
Where's that rebuttal?
I know. Can we get another chip?
No more chips, sorry. I honestly, sincerely want to thank all 4 of you for providing a very thoughtful and interesting conversation this evening. I was very impressed, and I mean that sincerely.
Thank you.
I want to thank our media partners, CKDO and Rogers, for your support of this this event, and to all of you actually for being engaged as community members. You make this possible. You're the reason these things happen, and where would we be without it? I finally want to thank the Whitby Public Library for hosting this event. And I would like to, it's not in the script, but I'll just go off script and thank the Natalie Perchichko at the Chamber and the Board of Directors and all of the staff who work so hard day in and day out to represent the interests of our business community and to engage our community as they have tonight. It's a lot of hard work after hours, and so I want to commend all of you for that great work. And I'd like to thank Matt, Mackenzie, and Tony for all the work that they were doing behind the scenes, because it's really difficult to make someone like me look good. So they somehow, I think, pulled it off okay. So thanks to you. And with that, I bid you all good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you.